This is lecture 73A on the struggle for communism in Turkey. We're going to start out with our discussion of primitive communism, chiefdom transition, and the early servitude epoch in this particular lecture, first of three on Turkey. And starting as I like to do with all of these countries, take a look at its geology and geography. With regard to the geology, Turkey's terrain is structurally complex. It's a central massif composed of uplifted blocks and downfolded troughs covered by recent deposits and giving the appearance of a plateau with a rough terrain. It's wedged between two folded mountain ranges that converge in the east. Now the true lowland is confined to the plain of the Aegean River and Thrace, extending along rivers that discharge into the Aegean Sea or the Sea of Marmara, and to a few narrow coastal strips along the Black Sea and Mediterranean sea coasts. Nearly 85% of the land is at an elevation of at least 450 meters. The medium altitude of the country is 1,128 meters. In Asiatic Turkey, flat or gently sloping land is rare and largely confined to the deltas of the Kizil River, the coastal plains of Antalya and Adana, and the valley floors of the Gediz River and the Buyuk-Menderes River, and some interior high plains in Anatolia, mainly around Golu and Konya Ovasi. That's the Salt Lake and the Konya Basin. Moderately sloping terrain is limited almost entirely outside Thrace to the hills of the Arabian platform along the border with Syria. Now, more than 80% of the land surface is rough, broken, and mountainous, and therefore is of limited agricultural value. The terrain's ruggedness is accentuated in the eastern part of the country, where there are two mountain ranges that converge into a lofty region with a median elevation of more than 1,500 meters, which reaches its highest point along the borders with Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Iran. Turkey's highest peak, Mount Ararat, Agridagi, is about 15,500 feet high. It's Byzantium, Constantinople, or Istanbul, near the point where the boundaries of the four countries meet. Now, the earliest geological history of Turkey is poorly understood, partly because of the problem of reconstructing how plate motions have tectonically assembled the region. Turkey is a collage of different pieces of ancient continental and oceanic lithosphere stuck together by younger igneous, volcanic, and sedimentary rocks. Except for a relatively small portion of its territory along the Syrian border, that is a continuation of the Arabian Plate, Turkey geologically is part of the great alpine belt that extends from the Atlantic Ocean to the Himalayan mountains. This belt was formed during the Cenozoic era, about 66 to 1.6 million years ago, in other words, as the Arabian, African, and Indian continental plates began to collide with the Eurasian plate. Now, this process is still at work today as the African plate converges with the Eurasian plate and the Anatolian plate escapes toward the west and southwest along strike-slip faults. These are the North Anatolian Fault Zone, which forms the present-day boundaries of Eurasia near the Black Sea coast, and the East Anatolian Fault Zone, which forms part of the boundary of the North African plate in the southeast. Because of this plate tectonics configuration, Turkey is one of the world's most active earthquake and volcanic regions. The Anatolian plate, together with the Aegean Peloponnesus block, is located near the center of a very wide region, including the Arabian plate with the adjacent Zagros Mountains and central Iran, that moves in a circulatory pattern at a relatively fast rate of 20 millimeters per year. The rate of this counterclockwise motion increases near the Hellenic Trench system south of Turkey and decreases away from it. That is, the Eurasian and African plates move at a rate of about 5 millimeters a year, resulting in internal deformation in several areas, including central and eastern Anatolia, southwestern Aegean Peloponnesus. Now, the Lesser Caucasus and central Iran are also part of that. Now, the dominant process in the region is the subduction of the African plate beneath the Hellenic Trench, and the deformation in the entire African-Arabian-Eurasian collision zone is most likely driven by the slab rollback of the subducting African plate in the eastern Mediterranean. This process is further fueled by slab pull forces in the Makran Trench and the Gulf of Oman, where the Arabian plate is subducting under Eurasia. A response to this tectonic maelstrom is the rifting in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, which will separate from Arabia from Africa. Now, taking a look at the physical geography, Turkey is situated in Anatolia, that is 95% of it, and the Balkans, with 5% of it, bordering the Black Sea between Bulgaria and Georgia, and bordering the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea between Greece and Syria. The geographic coordinates of the country lie at 39 degrees north and 35 degrees east. The area of Turkey is 302,535 square miles of land and 298,000 square miles of water. Now, Turkey extends 994 miles from the west to the east, but generally less than 497 miles from north to south. The total area of 302,500 square miles consists of about 292,000 square miles in Western Asia, that is Anatolia, and 9,175 square miles in southeastern Europe, or Thrace. Anatolia is large, roughly rectangular peninsula situated in Asia, and the Anatolian part of Turkey accounts for 95% of the country's area. It is also known as Asia Minor, Asiatic Turkey, or the Anatolian Plateau. The term Anatolia is most frequently used in specific reference to the large, semi-arid central plateau with hills and mountains that in many places limit the access to the fertile, densely settled coastal region's rim. The European portion of Turkey, known as Thrace, encompasses roughly 5% of its total area, but is home to more than 10% of its total population. Istanbul, the largest city of Thrace in Turkey, has a population of over 11 million. Thrace is separated from Anatolia, that is the Asian portion of Turkey, by the Bosphorus, the Sea of Marmara, and the Dardanelles, which collectively form the strategic Turkish straits that link the Aegean Sea with the Black Sea. Mount Ararat, Turkey's tallest mountain, has an elevation of almost 17,000 feet and is the legendary landing place of Noah's Ark in the far eastern portion of the country. In terms of the biogeography, in 2000, that is the year 2000, there were 9,300 species of vascular plant in the area of the Turkish Republic. The most important reasons for Turkey's high plant biodiversity are the relatively high proportion of endemics combined with a high degree of climate and edaphic variety. Now, Turkey has a large range of habitat types, and the diversity of its fauna is very great. There are nearly 1,500 species of vertebrates recorded, of which over 100 species, mostly fish, are endemic. The avifauna includes 482 species, of which 4 have been introduced by humans, and 78 species are rare. The country is on 2 major routes used by migratory birds, which swells the numbers in spring and autumn. And the invertebrates are also very diverse, with about 19,000 species being recorded, including 4,000 endemics. And there are 127 mammal species, of which 2 are critically endangered, 2 are endangered, 14 are vulnerable, and 3 are threatened. 14 species are globally threatened, and there are 136 species of reptiles in Turkey. Now, taking a quick look at the way in which the capital is designated, in 600 BC, Byzantium was founded by Greeks at the entrance of the Bosphorus and Black Seas. Then in AD 73, Byzantium was incorporated into the Roman Empire. In AD 324, Emperor Constantine relocated the seat of the Eastern Roman Empire to Byzantium, changing its name to Constantinople. In AD 381, the First Council of Constantinople was held in Hagia Irene Church. In AD 532, the city was burned, and in 860, Vikings first attacked the city. Then in AD 1204, Crusaders conquered the city, and during the siege of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade, the city was sacked. In AD 1453, Sultan Mehmet II, ruler of the Ottoman Empire, conquered the city, and it remained the Ottoman capital until 1923. In 1930, the city name was changed to Istanbul. So, for what it's worth, as you read these different names, you can always go back and take a look at when the name change occurred. Now, just for a few comments on the periodization. The system of periodization for human biological and sociocultural evolution we are following in these volumes begins with the transition of human-like apes into ape-like humans some 7 to 5 million years ago. And then we have the biological evolution of Homo, that is the genus, idealized in 3 grades, beginning with Homo australopithecus with cranial capacity of 500 cubic centimeters. Then by 2 million years ago we have Homo erectus with a cranial capacity of 1,000 cubic centimeters. And finally Homo sapiens by 1 million years ago, and continuing to the present with a cranial capacity of 1,500 cubic centimeters. Now I recap this now because specialists have given their own name designations to particular fossils, especially in Africa, for their own reasons. Now these are irrelevant for our biological and sociocultural evolutionary purposes, and you simply want to use the dates I will cite to determine in which grade a tool or fossil specimen is to be assigned. Now, primitive communism begins in Turkey with the Homo erectus skull and lower Paleolithic tools. The Kokopus skull cap in the Denizli Basin dates between 1.2 and 1.6 million years ago, and it's an ancient hominid fossil from Turkey. One study tends to link this specimen with the African fossils that their specialists call Homo ergaster and early Homo erectus, and to distinguish it from the Dmanisi skulls, which are 546 to 601 cubic centimeters in Georgia, that date at 1.8 million years ago, and the Asian Homo erectus. Now in December 2014, a stone flake tool was found in western Turkey in a geological deposit of known age. And this stone tool is composed mainly of quartz, and it's about 5 centimeters long. It was removed by a hard hammer blow, and it is at least 1.2 million years old. The flake was an incredibly exciting find, this scientist says in the Quaternary Science Review. I had been studying the sediments in the Meander Bend, and my eye was drawn to a pinkish stone on the surface. When I turned it over for a better look, the features of a humanly struck artifact were immediately apparent. This is Danielle Shreve of Royal Holloway University of London, a co-author of the reported Quaternary Science Review. This discovery is critical for establishing the timing and route of early human dispersal into Europe, and our research suggests that the flake is the earliest securely dated artifact from Turkey ever recorded, and was dropped on the floodplain by an early hominid well over 1 million years ago. Professor Darrell Maddy of Newcastle University, the lead author on the study, added, although the find of an individual struck flake may not in itself be unusual, the observation is significant because we can assign a precise time range to the artifact and thus the presence of hominids. We observed markings on the flake that clearly suggest it had been struck with force by a hard hammer or other stone tool, making it highly unlikely that it was shaped by natural processes. This quartzite flake was then dropped on the floodplain of an active river meander. That meander cut through lavas with age estimates of 1.24 million years ago, and was finally abandoned as a response to damming the river downstream by a younger lava flow dated to 1.17 million years. This makes it the earliest securely dated artifact from Turkey yet reported. Now, Anatolia lies at the gateway from Asia into Europe and has frequently been favored as a route for early Pleistocene hominid dispersal. Although early hominids are known to have occupied Turkey, with numerous finds of lower Paleolithic artifacts documented, the chronology of their dispersal has little reliable or geochronological constraint. Sites are rare, and the region's hominid history remains poorly understood as a result. Here we present a Paleolithic artifact, a hard hammer flake from fluvial sediments associated with the early Pleistocene Gediz River of western Turkey. Now, this previously documented buried river terrace sequence provides a clear stratigraphical context for the find and affords opportunities for independent age estimation using the numerous basaltic lava flows that emanated from nearby volcanic peaks and are periodically encroached onto the contemporary valley floor. New argon 40 to argon 39 age estimates from these flows are reported, which together with the paleomagnetic measurements allow a tightly constrained chronology for the artifact-bearing sediments to be established. And these results suggest that hominid occupation of the valley occurred within a time period spanning 1.24 million years ago to 1.17 million years ago, making this the earliest securely dated record of hominid occupation in Anatolia. The oldest hominid fossils in Anatolia are therefore Homo erectus, and recovered in 2007 in the deposits of travertine at Kokabos in the Denizli Basin. That is about 60 miles south of where the Flake was discovered. The partial skull presents a combination of archaic and evolved features that puts it as an intermediate specimen between the Dmanisi fossils in Georgia that the local investigator has named Homo georgicus, and the Chinese Choukoutian skulls of Homo erectus, respectively dated to 1.8 and 0.8 million years ago. The travertine unit is radiometrically dated between 1.22 and 1.5 million years ago, and the actual age of the fossils is likely to be in the 1.1 to 1.3 million year ago range. This absolute date is in close agreement with paleoanthropological conclusions based on morphometric comparisons, implying that the Kokabos hominid belongs to the Homo erectus S1 group. Furthermore, this date is confirmed by the large mammal assemblage, which is typical of the late Villafranchian. Now, for primitive communism of Homo sapiens in the Middle and Upper Paleolithic from 1 million to 12,000 BP, I'm only going to say that sites of the Middle and Upper Paleolithic in Turkey include the Yarmburgaz Cave in Istanbul, the Karain Cave in Antalya, and the Okazini, Beldibi, and Belbasi, Gubukagi, and Kadimi caves in adjacent areas. Remains of Paleolithic humans are stored at Ankar's Museum of Anatolian Civilization and in the Archaeological Museum in Antalya. Fruit and animal bones remains have been found in the Yarmburgaz caves in the Mediterranean region, and which also contains murals of these periods. Now, in terms of primitive communism, first of all, we have now we have broad spectrum hunting and gathering. Remains of a Mesolithic culture in Anatolia are found along the Mediterranean coast and also in Thrace and the western Black Sea area. Mesolithic artifacts have been located in the same caves as the Paleolithic artifacts and drawings. Additional findings come from the Sarkli Magara cave in Gaziantep, the Baradis cave in Burdur, as well as cemeteries and open-air settlements at Sugut, Tarlasi, Beris, and Urfa. The Neolithic Revolution and tribal agricultural stage is well known from Neolithic settlements at Catalhoyuk, Nivali Kari, Asikli Hoyuk, Bonkuklu Hoyuk, Hasalar, Göbekli Tepe, Norsen Tepe, Kosk, and Mersin. And then they move on to the Chalcolithic simple chiefdoms. Simple chiefdoms appear as early as the 6th millennium BC during the Chalcolithic period. They were trading with each other by the 3rd millennium BC. Straddling the Neolithic and early Bronze Age, the Chalcolithic era runs from 5500 to 3000 BC, and it features the first metal implements made with copper. Diagnostic sites are located at Hasalar, Baal Sultan, and then I name the rest of them I won't bother with here. They're in your book when you get it. Now, I think the most important single site is Catalhoyuk, which was an advanced theocratic chiefdom in central Turkey, and was the most advanced of the ATCs in Turkey. While Kayonu in the east is the oldest at 7,250 to 6,750 BC. The town plan at Koyunu begins with a central square with buildings constructed of stone and mud. Archaeological finds include farming tools, proving agriculture and animal husbandry, as well as domestication of the dog. True religion with professional practitioners existed, and archaeological remains include figurines of Cybele, the mother goddess. Hasalar in western Turkey followed Koyunu and dates to 7040 BC. From 3300 to 2500 BC, ATCs, that is, advanced theocratic chiefdoms, evolved from simple chiefdoms in Turkey. One such community was located on a high ridge known as Buyukkaya that later became the slave-stage city of Hattush. Eventually it became the Hittite city of Hattusha and is now Bogaskoy. We know this because the remnants of the Hattush ATC have been found under the lower city of Hattusha. The same material culture underlies the areas Buyukkaya and Buyukkale. Another ATC urban site was built at Yonkaya about 2 miles to the northeast. Archaeologically, this is the early Bronze Age. It begins in 3300 BC and is characterized by the use of copper and its tin alloy, bronze, for manufacturing agricultural implements. Asia Minor was one of the first areas to develop bronze making. Now we come to the slave stage kingdoms, writing and metallurgy. The Akkadian Empire was the first ancient Semitic-speaking empire of Mesopotamia, centered in the city of Akkad and its surrounding region. The empire united Akkadian and Sumerian speakers under one rule. The Akkadian Empire exercised influence across Mesopotamia, the Levant, and Anatolia, sending military expeditions as far south as Dilmun and Magan, which is modern Bahrain and Oman in the Arabian Peninsula. During the 3rd millennium BC, there was a very intimate bilingual cultural symbiosis between the Sumerians and the Akkadians. Akkadian gradually replaced Sumerian as the spoken language somewhere between the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC. The Akkadian Empire reached its political peak between the 24th and 22nd centuries BC, following the conquests by its founder Sargon of Akkad. Under Sargon and his successors, the Akkadian language was imposed on neighboring conquered states such as Elam and Gutium. Akkad was the first empire in Mesopotamian history. The discovery of mineral deposits in Anatolia, combined with the earlier Chalcolithic technological preparation, led to the craft of metallurgy, as proven by the implements found in the royal graves at Alaka Hoyuk. That cemetery is 15 miles from Bogaskoy, which dates from 2400 to 2200 BC. Other Hattian centers include Hasum, Kanesh, Purushanda, and Zawar. During this time, the Hattians engaged in trade with kingdoms such as those of Sumer, which needed timber products from the Amanus Mountains. Anatolia was without writing and stuck in the prehistoric period until traders introduced writing from Sargon I's Akkadian Empire in the 24th century BC. Writing was a necessary tool for trading and business. These transactions were recorded in Akkadian cuneiform on clay tablets. Records found at Kanesh use an advanced system of trading, computations, and credit lines. The records also indicate the names of the cities where the transactions occurred. The Akkadian Empire suffered class war that disrupted its economy. That war was exacerbated by the Mesopotamian climate, and the empire collapsed. Along the way, Sargon's form of slavery had reduced the available manpower for the creation of trade commodities, and thus of trade for accumulating capital. After the fall of the Akkadian Empire, the people of Mesopotamia eventually coalesced into two major Akkadian-speaking nations, Assyria in the north, and a few centuries later, Babylonia in the south. When Sargon fell in the 22nd century BC, it was the Gutians of Kurdistan who pulled the trigger. Now, little is known about the Gutian period or how long it endured, but cuneiform sources suggest that the Gutians' administration showed little concern for maintaining agriculture, written records, or public safety. They reputedly released all farm animals to roam about Mesopotamia freely, and soon brought about famine and rocketing grain prices. Therefore, Gutia ushered in a dark age with no prominent imperial authority until the third dynasty of Ur. The political structure of the region reverted to a variety of kingdoms, ATCs, simple chiefdoms, and tribal agricultural councils. The Sumerian king Ur-Nammu, from 2112 to 2095 BC, began clearing the Gutians from Mesopotamia, and that was completed by 2050. After the Assyrians overthrew their Gutian neighbors, they claimed the local resources, notably silver, for themselves. The Sumerian king list, describing the Akkadian Empire after the death of Shar-Kali-Shaki, states that there are no known year names or other archaeological evidence to verify any of these later kings of Akkad or Uruk, apart from a single artifact referencing King Dudu of Akkad. The named kings of Uruk may have been contemporaries of the last kings of Akkad, but in any event could not have been very prominent. The period between 2112 and 2004 BC is known as the Ur-3 period. Documents again began to be written in Sumerian, although Sumerian was becoming a purely literary or liturgical language, much as Latin later would be in medieval Europe. Now, historic Kurdistan from ancient Gutian. The Gutians were a branch of the Gete, Gauss, or Jats of Punjab, and hence of Scythian or East Iranic populations. According to linguistics and internal evidence of the Avesta, the Irano-Aryan language family originated high in the splendid Hindu Kush, or Indian Kushana Mountains of Afghanistan. Historical data indicates that one of these Proto-Iranic-speaking tribes was denominated Gut, or Gat. This ancient Iranic root denominated warrior. One branch of this legendary Gut, or warrior tribe, migrated to India, where they eventually became the renowned Jats. One branch migrated to Sumeria, establishing one of the greatest empires in Sumerian history. Denominated Gutian, this branch drove back the barbaric Semitic Akkadian invaders and inaugurated the famous Neo-Sumerian Renaissance. The Guti Qutals of central and southern Kurdistan, after gradually unifying the smaller mountain principalities, became strong enough in 2250 BC to actually annex Sumeria and the rest of lowland Mesopotamia, and that bunch ruled Sumeria for 130 years until 2120 BC. Sargon's incipient capitalist class in Akkadia wanted metal ores for manufacturing weapons and agricultural implements, especially for export. Their manufacturing technology, based on bronze metallurgy, had spread to Anatolia from Transcaucasian Kuro-Araxes culture in the late 4th millennium BC. Anatolia had plenty of copper ore, and with the discovery that it could be hardened with tin, the ores had suddenly become highly desired. There are written records from the Anatolian Plains area ringed by the Kizilirmak River. These were left behind by early Hittite kingdom scribes between 2500 and 2000 BC. Their Middle Bronze Age capital city was Hattush. Mercantile capitalists of this Hattush Middle Bronze Age conducted a brisk and substantial trade relationship with the early Minoans of Crete from 3400 to 2200 BC, as proven by archaeological findings at Knossos. Now we come to the Late Bronze Age, 2000 to 1200 BC. The Hattians met Assyrian traders from Assur in Mesopotamia at Kanesh, near modern Kultepes, selling and buying tin for bronze manufacturing. From such trading posts, or karums, as they were called, comes the name for the Karum period. The Karums were Assyrian trading colonies, and they persisted in Anatolia until Hammurabi conquered Assyria, and it fell under Babylonian domination in 1756 BC. Some Karums had separate residential areas where the traders lived and were protected by well-compensated Hittites. Meanwhile, the fortifications of Hattush featured the construction of royal residences on Bayou Kale. The feudal stage compromise. Now, the late Bronze Age collapse was a transitional period in the Near East, Asia Minor, the Aegean region, North Africa, Caucasus, Balkans, and the Eastern Mediterranean from the late Bronze Age to the early Iron Age. Class wars between slaves allied with underemployed artisans were so common that societal collapse was an ongoing feature of life. Some solution had to be found in Turkey, as it had to be found everywhere during the slave stage. In Turkey, as it was frequently elsewhere, the granting of more freedom to the slaves, making them into serfs, was the historic compromise. Accordingly, the palace market as the center of the economy of the Aegean region and Anatolia that characterized the late Bronze Age disintegrated. As slaves became serfs, they also became a market. That process transformed the slaves' pens into the small villages of the Greek Dark Ages. You should keep in mind the condition of Europe in its period of feudal compromise. Russia and Eastern Europe had poor farmers in a feudal system that was as near to slavery as possible, with farmers being sold with the land. On the other hand, you have English capitalist farmers leading poor farmers versus royalists, with serfs paying their masters for whatever rights to the land they could get. The contending parties in all cases getting as much of their demands as their relative strengths allowed. Turkey resembled both, depending on what part of the country you are observing. Now, from 1200 to 1150 BC, the Mycenaean kingdoms, the Kassite dynasty of Babylonia, the Hittite Empire in Anatolia and the Levant, and the Egyptian Empire collapsed. Thus we see the destruction of Ugarit and the Amorite states of the Levant, the fragmentation of the Luwian states of Western Asia Minor, and the period of chaos in Canaan. The process interrupted trade and the trade routes, and was accompanied by reduced emphasis on literacy as less business was being conducted. In the first phase of this period, almost every city between Pylos and Gaza was violently destroyed, and many abandoned, including Hattusa, Mycenae, and Ugarit. Professor Robert Drews puts it this way: within a period of 40 to 50 years at the end of the 13th and the beginning of the 12th century, almost every significant city in the eastern Mediterranean world was destroyed, and many of them never to be occupied again. Now, although Assyria and Elam survived, the slave stage collapsed by the end of the 12th century BC. Elam had declined after its defeat by Nebuchadnezzar I, and Nebuchadnezzar briefly revived Babylonian fortunes before suffering a series of his own defeats by the Assyrians. Then, with the death of Ashur-bel-kala in 1056 BC, Assyria declined for a century. The old Assyrian Empire shrank until by 1020 BC, Assyria controlled only the areas in its immediate vicinity. Nevertheless, Assyria itself survived. In these instances, the state apparatus, that is, the police and army establishments of the old empires, was simply too expensive to maintain. Post-collapse remnants of the Hittites coalesced into small Neo-Hittite and Syro-Hittite principalities in Cilicia and the Levant. The Levant kingdom being composed of mixed Hittite and Aramaean polities. Beginning in the mid-10th century BC, a series of small Aramaean kingdoms formed in the Levant. Then the Philistines settled in southern Canaan, where the Canaanite-speaking Semites had coalesced into a number of defined polities such as Israel, Moab, Edom, and Ammon. Now, for the Asiatic mode of production in Turkey. From 935 BC, Assyria, under new feudal management, was reorganized. Once more, it expanded into the Neo-Assyrian Empire from 911 to 605 BC, which came to control a vast area from the Caucasus to Egypt and Greek Cyprus to Persia. Phrygians, Cimmerians, and Elydians arrived in Asia Minor, and a new Hurrian polity of Urartu was formed in eastern Asia Minor and the southern Caucasus, where the Colchians or Georgians had emerged. Iran now included the Persians, Medes, Parthians, and Sargatians. The latter first appeared in ancient Iran soon after 1000 BC, displacing earlier non-Indo-European Kassites, Hurrians, and Gutians in the northwest. The indigenous language isolate-speaking Elamites and Manians continued to dominate the southwest and Caspian Sea regions, respectively. After the Orientalizing period in the Aegean, classical Greece emerged. The Hittites were an ancient Anatolian people who established an empire centered on Hattusa in north-central Anatolia around 1600 BC. This empire reached its height during the mid-14th century BC under Suppiluliuma I. Then it encompassed an area that included most of Anatolia, as well as parts of northern Levant and upper Mesopotamia. Between the 15th and 13th centuries BC, the Hittite Empire came into conflict with the Egyptian Empire, the Middle Assyrian Empire, and the Empire of Mitanni for control of the Near East. Out of this feudal dogfight, the Assyrians eventually emerged as the dominant power, annexing much of the Hittite Empire. The remainder was sacked by Phrygian newcomers to the region, and after 1180 BC, during the Bronze Age collapse, the Hittites splintered into several independent Neo-Hittite city-states, some of which survived until the 8th century BC before succumbing to the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The history of the Hittite civilization is known mostly from cuneiform texts found in the area of their empire and from the diplomatic and commercial correspondence found in various archives in Egypt and the Middle East. And that brings us to a conclusion of the long period from primitive communism through the chiefdom transition and up through the early slave stage.